You have to understand, if you were to stretch that out into 17 games, we're talking nearly 1,300 yards and 100 receptions for Cedric Tillman if we were to stretch that out into a 17-game stretch.
From a skill set perspective,
yeah,
he reminds me a little bit of like Cortland Sutton.
Look at the release.
There's your separation.
Great route.
Stutter and go. Gets by clean.
That is unbelievable.
Maybe the greatest catch I've ever seen.
Let's get into some of the pros and cons here of Cedric Tillman. 70% success rate versus man. That's good. Take that. We'll take that heartily. 76.6% success rate versus zone. Not so good. And again, it's so far off, right? It's not so far. I mean, we're getting there, right? Like you want to be at 80%.
Yeah.
He's at 76.6. Okay. So that's pretty good. But man, I would say though, he was downright good on these digs and slants. Again, we're talking about these in-breaking routes. I love it. 77% success rate on the dig, 83.6% on the slant. There's a lot to, I mean, again, is Cedric Tillman a perfect player? No, but there's a lot. I think there's a lot of ingredients here that we're working with in regards to Cedric Tillman. Obviously, health has got to be the number one issue, but if he's healthy, I think there's a lot to get excited about in terms of potential when we're talking about Cedric Tillman.
I was so fascinated to go back and chart Cedric Tillman because I remember charting him in season. And I was like, yeah, I a lot of the same notes that you just laid out there. Like, I think there's something here, especially with how he wins as a big X receiver over the middle on some of those routes there. And I was especially curious because I just know how, not just how the fantasy industry works, like how football people work, and frankly, just how human beings work. We always remember things based on how they start and how they finish. We never really remember how things were in the middle.
No.
And Cedric Tillman didn't finish the season, and he didn't really start the season. His moment was in the middle of the season because
Right.
prior to Amari Cooper being traded, and that was week 7, he was not really playing. And actually, as a matter of fact, I wrote this in the profile. Tillman was actually playing a lot of slot receiver from weeks 1 to 6. He took 43% of his snaps from the slot, which, just makes no sense because Tillman, and he was the team's 4th receiver. Okay. He was behind Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, and Elijah Moore. He's the 4th receiver. So he was barely playing, but when he was playing, he's actually taking a little bit of work from the slot, which is weird because again, he, as an X receiver prospect in reception perception, his prospect profile pointed to that. He took 86.7% of his sample snaps on the line of scrimmage. He was in one side of the field only. So we know that those guys can sometimes take a little bit of time to grow if they ever develop. If they ever hit, it takes these guys time. They're typically developmental guys, but he was a 90.7% snaps only at the right outside receiver position. So to me, it made sense that he didn't make an impact early on, especially because he was literally blocked by Amari Cooper as the team's X receiver. And that makes complete sense because then from week 7 on, Cedric Tillman only took 19% of his snaps from the slot. So he basically just was thrown into that X receiver position. And I think, again, why I really wanted to go back and study Tillman, because I think the way, like, people have pretty much forgotten that, Jerry Jeudy, and I'm always hard on Jerry Jeudy. I get it. People think I'm too hard on Jerry Jeudy, but whatever. He finished the season really strong. He had that monster game on Monday Night Football against the Broncos. People think like, oh yeah, he really took off with Jameis. But if you look at it from week 7 to 12, so this was after Amari Cooper was traded, and it was to Tillman's last game in week 12. The production is really close. Like, Jerry Jeudy had 397 yards. Cedric Tillman had 33. He had 26 catches to 25 for Jerry Jeudy, a team high 44 targets in that span, 29.7% of the air yards. That led the team. Again, even like Elijah Moore is not that, he's definitely was the least productive of the 3, but he still had 40 targets. Like, this was not as if this was the only Jerry Jeudy show. Like, Cedric Tillman was just as productive, had 3 touchdowns to 1 for Jeudy and Moore during that stretch before Cedric Tillman's season ended with a concussion on Thursday night against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And like I said, I think that's just like completely forgotten about. I know nobody really is like lining up to draft Cleveland Browns in fantasy football or anything, but Tillman's not going inside the top 60 receivers, whereas obviously because of where Jeudy finished, he's going not super high, but he's obviously going significantly higher than Tillman. And I think Jeudy obviously is at this point a better player, but like I said, that production was close. So that's why I wanted to go back and look at him. And I think what I found was a guy that I think can start at the X receiver position for this Cleveland Browns team, which is where he was playing. Once, like altogether, he took 73.4% sample snaps outside on the line of scrimmage for 63.7%. That was definitely up. Okay. Like that number on the line of scrimmage was definitely up in the games post Amari Cooper, and still with a very solid 70.2% in terms of success rate versus man. I think that's a guy that we can say can start at the X receiver position.
This is a player in Cedric Tillman that he had a 4-game stretch. Now, I know he started 5, but in that 5th game against Pittsburgh, he suffered that concussion, only played 53% of the snaps. He played 80 or more percent of the snaps between weeks 7 through 11. This is a 4-game stretch here, to Matt's point, where he just went off. I mean, this guy was catching everything, man, and just putting up big plays after big plays. In that 4-game stretch, he had 40 targets, so he averaged 10 targets per game. This is part of the Jameis scam that Matt Harmon always talks about.
Yes.
But had 24 receptions, 302 yards, and 3 touchdowns, averaging 12.6 yards per reception in those 4 games. Now, this is always a dangerous game to play, but just in terms of how productive were those 4 games, I know people don't like look at that 4-game stretch and like understand like what that means. You have to understand, if you were to stretch that out into 17 games, we're talking nearly 1,300 yards and 100 receptions for Cedric Tillman if we were to stretch that out into a 17-game stretch. So that's how productive he was from a counting stats situation there between weeks 7 and 11. Incredibly productive. Matt, I will say when I go to his profile, I am surprised, and it's because of that 4-game stretch. A 48% success rate on the 9 route with only 11% route participation. That actually does surprise me. It seemed as if he was running a lot more deep routes than what the charting would show.
Yeah, I think some of that is obviously it's depressed from the early part of the sample where he, like again,
sure,
it's only those week 7 to 12 games. That's not a full 8-game sample. So we got to throw in some of those little goofy games before the Amari Cooper trade. So some of that could be depressing it there, but still 80% success rate on the corner route. That's obviously a deeper pattern. Ran a dig on 76.9%, or excuse me, he ran a dig on 16.4% of his sampled routes, and a 76.9% success rate is very good.
That's really good.
That's where I thought he was the most impressive to me, was how he set up his routes and broke them off with a lot of fluidity on those like kind of deeper, bigger over routes, like digs in the intermediate area, things of that nature. His slant route percentage, 28.2% was really high. And he had an 83.6% success rate. Like I actually think I'll make a comparison at the end of this that like I don't want to stand by in terms of he's the next this guy, but I actually think from a skill set perspective, he reminds me a little bit of like Cortland Sutton as a bigger X receiver who runs a lot of these like digs and bigger over routes. He's also now Sutton obviously has lost juice at this point because he tore that ACL. He's really he's like maybe starting to get back into form, but obviously now he's getting older at this point. But he could really rumble on inbreakers after the catch, especially in that 2019 season. And as a prospect, also a good ball winner. Tillman dropped fewer than 2% of his sample targets, and he caught 4 of 5 contested passes. So that is very Cortland Sutton-esque to me in terms of how I think he can win.